Welcome to the 16th lecture of the online lecture series on language literature and cultural studies organized by the English Language Teachers Interaction Forum, Eltif. Let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Praveen, coordinator of the online programs of Eltif. Now, Dr. Sajida Sultana, a faculty of Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Hyderabad, will brief you about the programs of Eltif.
Eltif, with its mission of empowering rural India through English language education, strongly believes in a holistic approach towards teaching and learning and follows democratic practices. Since its establishment in the year 2002, Eltif has been involved in learning and teaching of English, organizing orientation and teacher training programs for students, teachers, and parents. It has engaged with hundreds of schools and colleges and numerous students from diverse backgrounds. From serving village schools in backward regions of Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Puducherry, to organizing workshops for researchers and teachers, Eltif has made several contributions to meet the educational needs of society. It has organized support programs for skilled and semi-skilled laborers, support programs for professionals in developing and fine-tuning their language skills and presentation skills, and coaching Anganwadi teachers, to name a few. This educational contribution of society is taken forward in the form of its quarterly professional publication, which is the Journal of Eltif. So now Eltif has extended its outreach by launching its online lecture series. You need not be a teacher or researcher to be part of Eltif. Any user or lover of English is welcome. And together we can make a difference. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sajida. Now, Ms. Vinija, a faculty of the ELT Center in Thrissur, will now introduce the speaker.
Welcome to today's online lecture by Dr. Tara Ratnam on the topic, where are we grounded theoretically in the practice we follow? I am very much privileged to introduce you to today's speaker, Dr. Tara Ratnam. Dr. Tara Ratnam is an independent teacher educator and researcher. She was formerly head Department of English, MMPU College, Mysore. She did her doctoral degree from the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad, on the developmental trajectories of ESL teachers using a cultural historical approach. She pursues research on fostering teacher learning and changing reflective communities of inquiry. She is also keenly interested in the issues of equity in education and in providing socially sensitive learning support to the culturally diverse student populations in an inclusive learning environment. Her career-long quest to understand the puzzles of why teachers hold on to their well-worn practice in a world that demands change led her to the idea of excessive teacher entitlement. This groundbreaking concept in teacher education is the theme of the book that is due for release soon. Understanding Excessive Teacher and Faculty Entitlement, Digging at the Roots. She is on the executive committee of the International Study Association on Teachers and Teaching, ISAT, and on the editorial board of the Teacher Education section of Frontiers in Education Journal. Among the research projects she is currently engaged in is a study of international perspectives on the educational implications of COVID-19 by engaging ISAT national representatives dispersed in different socio-cultural and geographic locations of the world. The findings will contribute to the shaping of the new educational narrative emerging in the current transitional period. She was with us for the program we conducted at Kannavam for the tribal students and international conference held at Regional Institute of English, South India, Bangalore. She has also empowered us by giving an enlightening talk at the Eltif conference held at Christ College, Irinalakuda, Thrissur in 2020. It was a great privilege indeed to spend time with such a great educationalist and to indulge in the productive discussion on English language teaching and teacher education. On behalf of Eltif, I extend a very warm welcome to you all.
Thank you, Dr. Praveen and Vinija, for that welcome. Make me feel really warmly welcomed. Now, good evening to everybody. I'd like to start by thanking Eltif, and in particular, its president, Dr. Bhaskaran Nair, for this opportunity to be interacting with you this evening. My connection with Eltif is not only growing longer over the years, but also very stronger with its continued commitment to serve the underserved sections of students, teachers, and communities. And I really miss the face-to-face, vibrant Eltif seminars, and especially the school visits. And the experience at Kannam was something very memorable. I really wish those days will come back soon, although right now, things look pretty bad. But until then, we have this online facilities to fall back on. Right. Let me now share my screen. So I'd like to start this evening's presentation with a teacher narrative, and that teacher is me. Way back in 1990s, I went to CFL, now FLU, to do my PhD. Not so much for certification, but to find an answer to a very nagging to a question that was really nagging me. And this was about bridging the learning gap for students, EFL students, and also to see how you can help the vernacular medium students to learn English, and also about the development of teachers to accomplish this. After 2 years of coursework, we are supposed to do a comprehensive exam. And I was petrified by this, to say the least. This is because I couldn't make sense of all the reading that I was doing in order to develop a very comprehensive view of the whole thing. And just a week before the exam, I really had a very strong urge to bundle up all my books, throw them out of the window, and just go back to my teaching. I even remember, so I went to this professor and I told him, I don't see any point in all these theories. I feel that as what I do as a practitioner in the field is what is more important. From my own experience, I can see why it's commonly felt that teachers as practitioners are only interested to hear about practical ideas for their classroom. And they don't go to think too much about the theory behind it. I've observed this in the training sessions for teachers. What teachers find useful are things that are doable for them and within their reach. A technique or two that they can apply directly without bothering about its purpose or meaning. This was the case when English was introduced in Karnataka, and I think in other states also in 2007 and 8 at the elementary level. What teachers took back after weeks of training were a few rhymes and ready-made dialogues to the classroom, and they made the children parrot it. You couldn't really figure out what they were singing, these children, except to make out by the tune. The words themselves were so garbled. And during the teachers' training sessions, teachers take down very religiously all the points that the resource persons put down either on the blackboard or where they compile it on PPT. However, these are put away and because they don't seem to have any practical value for the teachers. Teachers also admit that we can't understand much of what they say, that is the resource person. We just take down the points that they write. However, in the feedback forms that teachers have to fill out after the training is over, they say that the program was good and it was beneficial for them. But I suspect that this general appreciation seems to spring more from an obligation that they have to fulfill rather than any deeply felt influence from the training program itself. So, and then they go back to their classes. to resume their well-worn practice, and with a little bit of tinkering maybe. So time seems to really stand still in the classroom, where there's so much of change taking place in the society around. And it's in this context of change that I want to raise a couple of questions for us to consider in this program. Is theoretical thinking important for teachers? Now, what is the place of theory in teaching? And how can teachers connect to it meaningfully? My own thesis is that theoretical thinking, which involves reflection, voluntariness, and internal plan of action, is very important for us as teachers and educators. We need to think beyond the classroom at the world around and the kind of changes that are taking place in society, and analyze our practice to see how relevant it is for facing or preparing these children to face the challenges of the changing society. And then tune in and also find out how we need to retune our practice in order to fulfill these demands. In other words, how we respond to the challenge of change depends upon our understanding of what this change means in terms of learner needs and the direction in which we need to set our path of change, that is, our plan of action. Our sense of professional responsibility and also our capacity to act with agency, I think, depend upon the recognition of this need. Theoretical thinking actually helps us to gain a clarity of purpose in what we do and provides a direction to our practice. Teaching at a taken for granted level has come to be seen as transmission of accumulated cultural knowledge and skills. Now, this common sense assumption has cultural and historical antecedents, and we need to understand these because this is what gives us an insight into why there is so much resistance for change. I think it's relevant at this point to remember what Donald Schoen asserts, that the more things stay the same, the more you know that active efforts are being made to keep them that way. Education is a highly political enterprise because of its economic implications. And I think we need to really take note of this and understand this. Now, education, right from the ancient times, has had links to economic development. In the ancient times, students were trained to keep records of taxes and all the transactions, business transactions that were happening in the society. And so writing assumed a lot of importance, and teaching and learning meant the repetitive practice of the three famous R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. And this class organization that you see here, students sitting in rows facing the teacher, served this purpose of transmission, and it facilitated that. Now, during the British rule, also, diligent record keeping was a very important had a very important role in the administration to maintain the power of bureaucracy. And so in schools and in education, correctness in writing was very important. And this was reinforced by an examination system that linked to certification and jobs. Now we can see a reiteration of this colonial education system in the present neoliberal times also. We have common curriculum and uniform outcome expectations on standard tests. Now this has reached even global levels in the program for international student assessment, that is PISA. Now the problem with this standardization is that education becomes very competitive instead of cooperative. Now, improving test scores becomes the dominant concern of all the people, all the stakeholders, including, importantly, of teachers and students. In order to fulfill this need, we have most of teaching and months of revision focus on helping students to practice pattern and rehearse it for the examination. You can see an example of this pattern recognition and reproduction here. And the teacher says, if that's understood that it's, in the examination, ask who was the professor who studied linguistics. What should you write? Dr. Christopher Baum. Teacher, yes, Dr. Christopher Baum. If they ask you, who was Dr. Christopher Baum? Students in chorus, anthropologists. Teacher, anthropologists and linguists. So students then repeat and say anthropologists and linguists. So from this, you can see, it's a pattern the teacher sets and students have to follow that, and they have learnt it by rote to reproduce it in the examination. Now, tests and exams are really a nightmare for the teachers. In one of the private schools that I visited, one of the teachers told me that the management is merciless and issues pink slips if the results fall short of the expected 100%. They don't accept anything less than that. There's no compromise on that, and with maximum number of distinctions. Now, the problem is that when education, exam becomes an end in itself, the goal of education gets narrow, and then we seem to lose sight of the main purpose of what we are doing, which is to help students realize their potential for their life needs. Now, students' life needs are not simply connected to passing the exams, that is certification, school certification per se, but to the changing social world outside. Now, in this rapidly changing world, charting the unknown has become the new constant. We see this almost on a daily basis, especially with the pandemic adding new dimensions and complications to it. And this rapid change has created a conundrum for education. The certificate or the qualification that students leave school with doesn't really prepare them for the future jobs that they take. Now, if we look at all the new jobs that are sprouting that we had never heard of in the last 15 years, you can see a whole list: search engine operations specialists, SEOs, podcast producers, content writers, app developers, big data scientists, driverless car engineers, blockchain analysts, something like cloud, drone operators, cloud architect, chief listening officer, telemedicine engineers, and the pandemic has added many more professions, contact tracers, and the list can go on. Now, the development of artificial intelligence and robo, it has replaced millions of routine jobs. So what does this mean for our understanding of what learners need now? It is to become flexible, self-evolving learners who can respond to the transforming needs of the future creatively and thoughtfully. And what does this mean for us as teachers? It means a change in teaching, from teaching to produce bags of content, to engaging students creatively in problem-solving contexts and promote communicative skills so that they can work collaboratively as a team. If you look at this aspirational statements that policy makes, it's all about promoting 21st century skills of creative and critical thinking, problem posing and problem solving, communication and collaboration. So what happens is these words are used, all of these 21st century skills, they are used and overused in talking about what education should be. And there's hardly any attention paid, real genuine attention to what should change in the classroom practice. And what do we see in the classroom? Teachers are bound by the norms of timetable, syllabus, completing the prescribed curriculum and standard tests. We can't imagine anything outside test scores. So much so that we have come to equate learning with knowing the right answer, rather than discovering the means to it. I'd just like to play a video and which substantiates this. Okay, I'll explain what was happening. This teacher told me that she had completed a lesson on daily activities, and now she was testing their learning. And the students who didn't get the right answer, you could make out, they just meekly went back to their seat with only one negative feedback from the teacher, who said, that's not correct. So she just said, it's not correct. And there was no attempt to extend the students' thinking to see why their answer was wrong, or help them with some cues whereby they could extend the meaning and they could figure out what was wrong and reach new levels of understanding and become self-regulated learners of language. Now, teachers in general also admit that they do give a chance for everybody to answer, but when it comes to wrong answer, but if they don't give the right answer, then they just ask somebody else to do it. We ask students to know, students who know to give the answer. We cannot spend time to help every student individually. There are many other students and we don't have the time. We have to finish the portions for the test. So these are teachers' concerns. And I was just thinking how justifiable this explanation is. Now, I think as teachers, we need to really go beyond this cliched kind of response and then think a little further and see which is more useful within the available class time, rushing to cover the curriculum or supporting students to uncover it. Now, before we go further, I want to share with you a couple of questions that this video clip raised for me. I think it's a very run-of-the-mill, ordinary, innocuous kind of classroom episode it looked like, but it has very powerful message for to mirror to us, I think, as teachers. Now, my questions are, what do the crestfallen faces of two of the students in the video clip speak of their identity as learners? Is technology an easy substitute for testing, or can it be used as a tool for weaving meaningful learning conversations? So these are the questions that I think we need to think about. Now, we seem to forget that language learning, we need language learning in order to be able to participate in a wide range of activities that relate us to others and to the world around us, and also to communicate with others and coordinate our actions as we engage in these goal-oriented activities. So the question for us as teachers is to look at this real life need goal of teaching ESL and see how we can promote this ability of students to communicate in ESL and not just learn answers by rote to reproduce in the examination. Now, these questions will perhaps motivate us to look afresh at our own practice and see how we can promote relevant language learning. Now, this is where I feel that alternative theoretical perspectives that come from years of scholarly research, these provide another perspective, another angle from which we can view our own routine practices. And maybe this will help us to understand, look at our own practice in a new line, and then look for some alternative ways of doing things also. Now, this has been my real life experience, and I'd like to share this narrative with you. Now, in my early days as a teacher, this is my journey from transmitting knowledge to negotiating meaning. Now, in my early days as a teacher, I was very naive and I was very insensitive in many ways to the impact of what I did in class on what impact it had on students and the oppression that they experience. But my intentions were very good nonetheless. I wanted all my students from the vernacular medium to learn English, become very proficient. So I thought that by providing them maximum exposure to English, by using only English in class, would really help them, immerse them in that English environment, and then help them to learn. And so I think, my early socialization in a convent school has much to contribute to this kind of assumption that I built up very implicitly or tacitly. And so I will still remember there used to be a round money box that was placed at the center of the teacher's table. And into this went all the fines that students had to pay if they used their mother tongue. We were made to feel guilty if we used our mother tongue, and imagine we thought that it was a crime to use mother tongue in class, in school. But we never were critical at that point in time. And so we didn't really question this practice, which took away our voice. I realized this much later in my career as a teacher, when I was interviewing one of my students whom I used to teach in the very early days of my teaching, my greenhorn days, as you were. Now, this student told me, I expected at least 30% Kannada from you. I could not participate in your class, but in the history class, I used to answer questions. Now, it's here that the theoretical work of Lev Vygotsky helped me to identify the problem with my teaching. Vygotsky's ideas about how learning takes place helped me to scrutinize my own practice very critically, and it made me look at teaching very differently. According to Vygotsky, language learning takes place as students contribute to purposeful activity. It's a process that involves learners actively in reconstructing the knowledge and skills presented to them using all the resources they bring to learning, the experience, the language, and knowledge that they have gathered in their community. This was like a revelation for me. It made me question what I was doing in the name of providing maximum exposure using English only. I was turning my students from individuals into non-entities, total zeros, by erasing all the rich language, knowledge, experience that they brought from their home community. They were left with no voice to actively and agentively connect to my teaching. So in effect, my noble intention of teaching English was actually silencing all the students and turning them away from me. The worst part was that the students had to take the blame for teachers' lack of understanding. A lack of understanding that that transformative learning can never happen in a transmission model. As Vygotsky points out, learning is an interactional kind of an activity, and this is a process that is interactional both at the individual plane within the learner, and also on the social plane between the learner and his peers, between the learner and the teacher. So it calls for negotiation of meaning and not its unidirectional transmission. I'd like to illustrate with an example from my practice what this teaching and learning as a generative process of meaning negotiation means. Now, if you can take a couple of minutes and read this transcription. And I just want to tell you before you start reading that what you see here highlighted in yellow are the parts that we used in English. That is the student Anand and me used in English. And the rest of it is a rough translation from students' vernacular that I did. Missing in it is the poetic flow of his mother tongue, which I couldn't really capture in English. Now, take a look at this. And I also want to tell you that this, the context of this was that I'd given the students, they were doing a picture story that they had to construct into a sentence working in groups. And I noticed that this boy, Anand, was left out of his group. And he was just sitting there by himself and staring into the picture. And so I wanted to engage him and also make him feel included in the group. Just signal to me when you come to the end of this. While spending a little time to analyze this classroom excerpt, because it helps us to see how negotiation for meaning creates opportunities for students to use their lived experience to connect to both the teachers and teaching, and also has several advantages over teaching as passing the content of the text, because it enhances their interest and also their engagement in learning through their active contribution, as you can see in this excerpt. Now, I just want to go through it a little more in detail. I use this as an opening to a conversation by approaching him in his mother tongue. And I posed this question, what is this? And then he said, bird. And after that, I pushed him a little further. And then I asked him to tell me the term in English. And he answered. And so this gave me some encouragement to go further. And the next question, with some gestural help, I posed it in English. And then he seemed to understand. And then he said, fish, because in his vernacular, F sound is substituted by P. And so now what you can see here is his responsiveness as a learner. He was able to guess what my expectations were, and he was, as a student and was in response to it, he was trying to fulfill that expectation by trying to use as much English as he could. That you can see in this next question. How did you guess it was the fish? And then he says, it's here, miss. And he says, birds like fish, miss. So this to me was an indication that he was ready to use more English. And so I kind of posed my next question in English. And then he couldn't really figure out the meaning. And so I had to mix his mother tongue and then make that question accessible to him. And once he understood the question, he was very excited because it tapped into his lived experience, something that he could share, and from his experience, some knowledge that he could contribute from his experience. And then in this context that both of us were tuned into, there was no need for me to use this, any overt translation of the word duck that I used, because he seemed to understand it from the context. And then you can see here that Anand has been using all this, his experience, not only to this experience was evoked by the picture story and the conversation that we were having. And in turn, what happened was that he used his experience to connect to the text and to the teachers and to the peers, because the text was also thematically linked to this picture story. And Anand's conversation was also very, and the conversation that we had, as you could see, was a genuine negotiation for meaning on a topic that interested both of us. And I was really struck by the way he used the word urgent, because he's using all his resources to convey his meaning to me. And I was struck by this use of this word urgent, to convey that, the bird's need was very urgent. And to me, the way he was using the words showed his urgency in wanting to express himself. Now, this to me was an indication of the potential level of development in Anand. This is a term that Vygotsky uses. It indicates a level of development beyond his actual level of development. That is, in interaction, Anand was able to use whatever language repertoire he had to express, to coin, to create and generate new meaning, to produce meaning. And Vygotsky actually talks of two zones. One is the level of actual development, and this is the level at which learners can work independently without any assistance. And this is the level at which standard tests are pitched. This is the focus of standard tests and questions. Now, for us as teachers, what is more interesting and important to know is the level of potential development. That is, going beyond the actual development and using all the resources that one has in order to produce new meaning. And this is possible only in interaction. Now, the distance between these two is what Vygotsky calls the zone of proximal development. And according to Vygotsky, the best learning experience that we can actually provide to our students is the one which can activate students' ZPD. And he says, because this awakens a variety of internal developmental processes that are able then to operate only in interaction with others. And it is in this interaction that they produce new meaning and this moves them forward in their developmental path. Now, this distinction that Vygotsky makes between the level of actual development and level of potential development, I found this very, very enlightening, because it helped me to move my own practice from being oriented towards what Vygotsky calls yesterday's development to focus on tomorrow's development. In teaching diverse students, what we often do is, we focus, especially when these students are from mother tongue medium and come with low proficiency in English, we feel compelled to read and explain the text because we feel otherwise they don't understand. Now, what we're doing actually by this is depriving them of the opportunity to become independent readers. Now, Vygotsky helps us with a way out of this trap that we fall into as teachers by suggesting that it is best to aim our instruction not at the level of actual development, but at the level of potential development by providing appropriate support and also challenge. Now, this potential level, or what he calls the buds of development, they become visible when we engage students in joint activities and they contribute to it, from the level of contribution, from the way they contribute to it. And these joint activities are what gives us an opportunity to connect to students and activate their ZPD. And Anand's case illustrates how learning in this could, how we can really, how it's possible to teach in the present for the future by engaging students in negotiation of meaning in problem-solving context. And this promotes not only language learning, but also creative thinking. This excerpt, I think, has brought this point home. And I have summed this up, how this idea of teaching to the future in the present can take place. What I think is very important for us as teachers to note is that we need to make language a pliable tool that becomes a medium for their own future activities, and not simply, knowledge stored inertly to be retrieved and reproduced in the tests and exam. That's not really going to help them in their real life. And how can we do this? We can do it, we can facilitate this process by activating students' ZPD through joint explorative activities. And then that creates context for engaging them in meaning-making interactions with the text and teachers and with peers also. And I think what's very important is to build on students' contribution, not just give them, just a corrective feedback and close the conversation. But I think we need to extend it and in this joint meaning-making process so that learning becomes personally relevant. As it became for Anand, his learning was very relevant because it connected to his experience and his knowledge. And then they feel very motivated, and then they can incorporate this meaningfully into their expanding language repertoire. So lastly, I want to stress that how we mediate learning depends upon our understanding of this need. As long as, in my own case, as long as I held the dualistic view of language learning, of providing maximum exposure without looking at student response, then in an input-output model of teaching, I failed to see the students' need to contribute to co-construction of meaning using their living language. It is theoretical thinking that helped me here to recognize this need. And once I recognized this need, that became a motivation for me to develop my own agency as a teacher to do things differently. And after all, I was also a teacher within the same context and the same kind of administrative context that everybody else is teaching. And I think that should kind of make you think that it is possible to bring about changes in the classroom. We do need to think how we can use our autonomy as teachers to do this. I think I'll stop here, and I want to share something with you, leave you with a question as a takeaway from me, and that you can really think about and also explore in your own practice. I think it's very important for us as teachers to ask ourselves time and again, and I keep asking myself even today in my interactions with students and teachers, what is the value we hold and want to fulfill in our action as teachers? If we fail to ask these questions over and over again, what happens is we slip into that old kind of a groove where we feel the anxiety of exam breathing over us, and then we'll want to go back and do repetitive things and not really go forward and teach to the future. And I thought this Dewey's quote was very relevant. He says, if we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. And I think there's a lot to think here. Thank you so much for your patient hearing.
Let us now move on to the Q&A session. Dr. Leena, take over. She'll be moderating the Q&A session. She's a teacher from St. Joseph School, Kochi.
Prashant Reddy raised a question, ma'am, that how to use L1 in the L2 classroom to enhance language learning.
Oh, okay. So this excerpt that I showed was all about that. I mean, you saw it, you know, whatever was in black that you saw, that was all actually used in, mother tongue, both me and the student. We were actually conversing in mother tongue, and only what you saw highlighted in yellow, that was the English that we used. And so to make it intelligible to the readers, I translated it. So I was using mother tongue. For instance, in that excerpt, I was using mother tongue to open the dialogue with Anand, and then to make sure to also ensure that he understood the questions that I posed to him. And I didn't use all Kannada, L1. If you see, gradually I was trying to, push towards English more and more. But I was also very careful to see that whatever English that we used between us was intelligible to both of us. So I think this would kind of give you an idea of, it's actually, I think it's an art. There's a lot of art that we never think of. We only think about reflection and, this Eisner, he talks about the artistic in education and in teaching. And it's going beyond what we call phronesis. Then to phronesis is about practice. As teachers, we only look at reflective practitioner. But then this is going beyond, you learn to tune into the student, and then you kind of, it's like music when you play, a violinist and a singer, or between two artists, how you coordinate. You develop that. Like, dancing a tango. You understand what the students' needs are, and you know when to pitch in with Kannada, and then when you can switch over. I mean, I meant Kannada, that is the students' L1, and when to switch over. I think you get a feel for this the more you try and experiment, and there's a lot of trial and error that we have this in our classroom that we can do with the students. Have I answered your question?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, two or more participants addressed the same question, ma'am, that when the system expects 10% or A+, what can a teacher do with all these learning theories? Yeah,
I'd like to pose a question also. Over the years, not 1 or 2 decades, over centuries, I should say, if by this shortcut, arriving without travel, as Dr. Prabhu said, if we could do that and help students to learn answers by rote and reproduce it in the exam, where would we have, if they could succeed with that, where would we have any problem at all? The problem is, I'm not against memorization per se, because memory is very important. Very often I feel that I keep forgetting many things, names, and many points, many things that I would want to remember. Memory is very important for us, but that memory has to come through understanding for it to be sustaining, and for us to be able to deploy it. So if we understand this, then we need to question. Then I'd like to question how then, what are you achieving by this rote practices? Or would you, that's why I posed that question there when teacher said that we feel really compelled to just carry on and cover the portions. Now, my question was, we need to stop and we need to become a little more adventurous and think out of the box. And we need to really question and see, what are we achieving by this shortcut that we are, recourse to? Are we achieving really anything substantial? Are students really, does it serve their exam purpose? Exam, you have inflated marks and other things to push them anyway. No, so why don't we use that time to help them to really fulfill their real life needs for communication? And this, in fact, will help them to, address the examination problem better, I feel. Not less, but more. Yeah, you know what, like in one of the schools that I was visiting, there was this seller of a guide, and he had compiled, what is this, question papers with answers for 10 years. And he came there and he was kind of, dishing it out like a magic potion. And he said, all you need to do is go through these questions of 10 years and learn all those answers, and you will definitely pass. And you'll also get very good marks. Now, that's what we believe, that, that should help us question our assumption. Is it possible to learn? If students were able to learn all those 10 years of answers to all the questions, where's the problem then? Why would we have this problem of, bridging the gap of learners?
Okay, ma'am. One more question, ma'am. How can a teacher ensure learner autonomy the same way that you have mentioned? How can the teacher ensure that learner autonomy?
Yes, but how can autonomy develop? You can't give autonomy to another person. It has to, the person has to be free to develop. It's like in the convent school that I studied, our voice was snatched away because we didn't even question the mother tongue. That's the basis of our autonomy, isn't it? Because that's where we have our voice, our experience, and that is how we can contribute. We learn something new by contributing. Remember what Vygotsky said, that learning is a process of reconstruction of what is presented to us as new knowledge based on the contribution that we make, how we connect to it from our cultural and experiential location. That's very important. And we seem to forget that. So in order to do this, we have to give voice to students to help them to develop their autonomy. And how can we do this? Not by this input-output model of teaching of teacher-centered practices, the anxiety that students don't know, and teaching to yesterday's development by reading and by doing everything on behalf of the students. We also, I know teachers give notes because they say students make mistakes. How do you learn without making mistakes? I mean, no child walks without falling. And so we need to learn that. And we need to have confidence in our students. See, given the opportunity, there was so much potential in learning potential in Anand that would have gone unnoticed, and he would have been branded as a dull, stupid student who's not interested, who's not motivated, who cannot participate. Just imagine how much violence we do to how many students in the classroom by shutting out their voice. And that's why I played that clip, because it brought out that message so powerfully. So learner autonomy can be given when we engage them in some problem-posing activity through a question, through an activity that I had given them to, I gave them a whole lot of pictures. And then I said, now you work in groups and you construct a sentence out of it. And as they were doing that, that was an opportunity for me to go around and find out what meaning they were making and then help them, provide them support. So as Vygotsky said, that we need to, in this, when we teach at the upper end of ZPD, then we need to provide not only challenge, we need to also provide appropriate support for that challenge. so that students are able, you should make it possible for them to connect to the activity, to the language, and then participate in this negotiation for meaning.
Okay, ma'am. One more question, Mr. Ranjit raised. If the teacher is not proficient in mother tongue, is it right to ask the student to translate the words in mother tongue like that?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I once taught, a class of students. They spoke Urdu, and I didn't know much Urdu. I know a little bit of Hindi, but it was really, I mean, we negotiated for meaning, and that was really very, very genuine, because they were trying to figure out what I was saying in English, and I was trying to figure out what they were saying in their mother tongue. It was such great fun. At the end of 1 year, this is an outside, the regular class. And in 1 year's time, we had become really proficient in each other's language. Not really proficient to a very great extent. At least we could communicate with each other. And there was a lot of learning that happened, because it was really a motivation for me to learn from them, and a motivation for them to learn from me. So this exchange, there are many ways. You just have to just let go. Now, suppose you went out and you went to a country, let's say Italy or Germany or some other countries, to Timbuktu, and then you don't know the language. How do you manage? You manage. And I didn't know much of Russian, except a few words. And on the plane, I met two Russians who were sitting next to me on either side. And they didn't know much English. They knew a little bit of French. And then we were conversing throughout the 2 hours of flight. And at the end of it, we'd become very good friends. So we do find ways in real life to communicate with each other. We have language, we have gestures, we have many ways of communicating. And so it's not really difficult to establish that communication, I think. And in India, after all, it's a multicultural kind of situation where everybody speaks at least 3 to 4 languages. They understand many more languages. And I don't think we should be complaining about this.
One last question, ma'am.
Yeah.
Mr. Prakash raised, do you have any hope about the NEP 2020, which concern learning rather than testing?
I think I have answered this question. Yeah. In an indirect way, maybe. Let me answer it more directly. See, NEP, any statement, policy statement comes with a vision, and they always pick up the best, and they also pick up the latest discourse in language learning, or any learning for that matter, not just language. NEP is about all other subjects also. So, and all the new concepts. And the present NEP also talks about the 26, promoting 21st century skills. And they're even talking about bringing about changes in evaluation, which is very hopeful for teachers, I think, especially if you want to develop your autonomy as teachers. This is the chance for you. Because why should you always look at a standard answer? Why should everybody write one right answer? Why can't we have different answers? And so this is a possibility. And then we need to explore all this. And the statement itself provides scope for exploring all these possibilities, but how it is really actualized in the classroom and the kind of autonomy that we assume, I'm not at all saying that we are not under pressure. We are under pressure, and the same officers who preach that we have to do learner-centered teaching and we have to forget about teacher-centered teaching. They come to schools and then they say, did you give notes? Have you completed the portions? So these are things, realities. I'm not unaware of these realities, but still I feel that, if you co-opt the students and they also realize that, this is a better way of learning and that there is more personalized learning in this, then they will also be interested. And this would be a better way of even overcoming your conventional demands of all the superiors around you than if you taught them to just learn answers by rote. I just wanted to introduce a new book that's coming up. And this is about a paradox in education, about why teachers, push against change. And why are they reluctant to change? This is very closely connected to my presentation also. And then it was this puzzle. And if you see what teachers say, and I think you can relate to this, after teaching, explaining both in English and Kannada, and asking questions, make them repeat answers. I make them write in class and ask them to write it again at home. And after all this, I ask them to answer the test. I don't know what happens. They don't remember the answers. I don't know what else I can do. I think I'll have to open their heads and pour it in. So this also, I think, answers many of your questions. Now, this teacher, if you go to see, is very well-intentioned. But at the same time, unfortunately, instead of, there is a kind of an attitude of self-righteousness, if you can see, in this teacher, who feels that she's doing everything right. And it's for the students to actually work and harder maybe, and then do well in the exam, because she has done her teaching, and it's for the students to now learn and answer in the exam. I mean, teachers don't seem to realize that they have to look at their own practice and see whether what they are doing is really connecting to students. So they want to help all, they're very well-intentioned, they want to help all students, like me in the beginning, yes. And then but in their practice, if you analyze what this teacher was saying, you see she's also blaming students. And then there is this kind of, forsaking of teacher agency, to capacity to act thoughtfully. Now, there is a complex mix of self-righteousness, and they're all contradictory feelings. There is care. There's no care. There is patience. There's also impatience. There's frustration, anger, and there is self-pity. There's helplessness. There's a feeling of superiority. All of this. Now, I was trying to kind of, find the language to see how to really express, give how can I kind of characterize this complex mix of emotions and also feelings and thinking that these, and assumptions, not to forget the assumptions that these teachers come with. And that's when I hit upon this idea of excessive teacher entitlement. And this is a new theme in teacher education. And we looked at all the review of literature all over the world. And then we came to know that this is something groundbreaking. And I think this is very useful. In literature, we have what is called excessive student entitlement. That is students demanding for more marks and then, expecting when it's not fair. But then we need to also, if we want to understand excessive entitlement in students, then I think we need to also see how we can connected to teacher excessive entitlement. And excessive entitlement all around, I think we need to look at. Otherwise, will you just going in circles blaming each other? And this book is an outcome. What is this excessive teacher entitlement? It is teacher blind spot that makes them feel entitled to blame students and others around them, all the extraneous factors, without holding their own practice to scrutiny. Now, this book is about, developing a sympathetic understanding of teacher, and it provides some professional knowledge into why this excessive teacher entitlement. I'm not labeling teachers by this. This is actually putative. That means we are just kind of, using the term. It seems as if teachers are entitled. But then there are several reasons for this. And this book actually brings together researchers from many diverse geographical contexts, and it addresses educators and researchers with spin-off also to the needs of management resources, because there also you talk about employee and employer entitlement. So I think this is a very timely kind of a book that would make you think about our own situation, what we are doing, and how we can change it. And yeah, I want to especially stress on this metaphor of digging to the roots, it says. That's the subtitle of the book. And I just want to stress once more that we are not blaming teachers, but going to the root of what makes teachers with good intention act excessively entitled. And also look at all the factors in the social and cultural, institutional context in which teachers work that activate, and in their interaction with others that activate this excessively entitled feelings. Now, if for example, if a school inspector comes and questions the teacher, who's really working very hard to help students, and he says, you're not doing your job properly and you've not kept the records, how will the teacher feel? Like she'd feel like kind of, she or he feels like turning back and then, saying, why is this is unfair on the part of the teacher. So there is this kind of excessive entitled feelings that are provoked in our interaction with our colleagues, with students, with parents, with teachers, with everybody. And then what are these various often contradictory demands and pressures that are placed on the teachers, and that have a very negative impact on them? And then, and most importantly, why are we analyzing all this? It is to reimagine how teacher education can be changed so that we can understand, how we can help teachers to change and reclaim their autonomy. And I think that's very, very important. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm done. So I think I'll stop sharing.
Yes,
and
please.
Thanks a lot for your patience and hearing.
Well, madam, hearty congratulations for getting that book ready and publishing it.
Thank you.
I must say it is very timely, We are at the crossroads right now. There's change in technology, the environment changes, and now there is a shift to online pedagogy. And at the other extreme, people are saying artificial intelligence can take over. Exactly. And so it's if you have teaching with sound theoretical backing based on research, the kind of work you've done, it's going to be a great help. Your work is definitely going to be a great contribution to ELT. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations once again. And now let's move on. There's a formal vote of thanks. May I request Mr. Mohanan? He's a teacher from the Higher Secondary School, Kuthuparamba, and a member of the Online Programs Committee. I request Mr. Mohanan to log in and formally thank our speaker and the participants.
Most Honorable Speaker of the Day, Dr. Tara Ratnam, teacher, educator, and researcher. I'm really honored to take this opportunity to propose a vote of thanks. First of all, let me give a sincere and heartfelt vote of thanks to Dr. Tara Ratnam, who gave us an encouraging talk on where are we grounded theoretically in the practice we follow, and made this evening really fruitful to all of us. Madam, your speech was really very, very enlightening to all of us, especially as it was enriched with a lot of precious knowledge and valuable pieces of information, your genuine findings and opinions. The very topic you selected is in a way startlingly interesting. Madam, I feel that instead of negating theories, you were rather accommodating and incorporating all the theories to make them transcend to create some new dimensions of reality. You spoke about how theories can be adopted and adapted in order to meet the needs and aspirations of learners in a very, very simple, clear, and interesting language, elaborating on the significance of reflection, voluntariness, and plan of action in facilitating teaching learning process. Madam, you clearly explained the necessity of refining the curriculum and the strategies in order to help the learners prepare themselves for the future, equipping them to respond to the transformation and the challenges, giving an extra emphasis on the 21st century skills like critical thinking, problem solving, communication, collaboration, etc. The discussion related to the Vygotskian theories was wonderfully enlightening. You kept us active all throughout with interesting deliberations on how to reteach tomorrow's development. The Q&A session was also very informative and exciting. Your brilliant lecture helped us to seriously contemplate on the significance of paying attention to the ways in which negotiation of meanings can be effectively accomplished in the classrooms. The use of the concept of ZPD and many more ideas. Let me take this opportunity to mention our deep sense of appreciation for your brilliant speech. Madam, the way you explained things was exemplary. While talking about the need for language and the ways in which it can be promoted, you started with language, moved on to languaging, and even to translanguaging, especially when you were talking, you were trying to answer the questions related to the use of mother tongue in the classrooms. And all, even without us noticing the theoretical underpinnings. I, on behalf of Eltif and the entire team, and also the audience, and on my own behalf, extend a very hearty word of thanks to you, ma'am, for having graced us with your presence and shared with us your felicitous words. There are many people who worked behind the scene to execute this event, our technical arrangements team and the others who render the support all the time. I mean the Eltif fraternity. I wholeheartedly thank all the members of Eltif. And finally, dear participants, your presence and cooperation, your support, your active interaction, your encouragement, and all these things made this program a success. I'm happy to express a word of thanks to all of you